My name is Lorraine Oates. I'm Vice President of Professional Development of CUPFA, and I'd like to welcome you all here this evening to our first in a series of 3 MicroTalks. The MicroTalks were organized by myself, Donna Nebenzal, who's coordinating tonight's talk, and also Alison Loader, who can't be here this evening because she's in Scotland. I'd like to really thank both Alison and Donna for all of the work that they put into this evening, and also to all of our presenters. We have 10 presenters speaking this evening, and they'll be sharing with you their recent research, and 30 presenters in all. So tonight's talk is, the theme of tonight's talk is called Control and Identity. So all the talks in some way loosely connect to that theme. We have 2 other themes, light and landscape, and community and culture. So the light and landscape talk will be on in January 21st, also a Tuesday evening in this room at 6:30. And the community and culture will be February 25th, also at 6:30 in this evening. So please spread the word and come to all 3 talks if you can. We're very excited about this evening. They're truly interdisciplinary talks. We have speakers from all over the university, and the other 2 talks will reflect that as well. I'd like to thank a few people, Donna and Alison particularly. I'd also like to thank the Design and Computation Arts program for allowing us to use their facilities. It was an absolute godsend. I'd also like to thank Pat Macedo for designing an absolutely beautiful poster, and also Adrian Nervin for allowing us to use his image. And he will be speaking tonight, one of the speakers. We have, unfortunately, our new president, Dave Douglas, can't be here tonight because he's teaching and his class was too big to break, so he wanted to congratulate the speakers and thank them for their presentations this evening. But we do have Maria Peluso here this evening, our past president, as well as our new provo, Benoit Antoine Bécon. So thank you for coming as well. There'll be truly 6-minute talks. We have a timer, and we're going to have a break in the middle, and at the end we're going to open it up for discussion. So please, everybody, participate in the discussion. Some people will have to leave early, so there'll be a little bit of movement over the course of the evening. Once again, thank you for coming, and enjoy our very first MicroTalk, Control and Identity.
Thanks, Lorraine. Okay, everyone. The theme for this discussion speaks to control. The many types of control, whether positive or negative, that seem to affect us whether we're really aware of it or not. Like it or not, we are controlled by governments, by cultural perceptions, by technology. Even when we're aware of it, forms of control can alter the way we think of ourselves. We'd like to raise the question, how do these controls shape our identity? As you will see, our speakers tonight will examine control and identity from many angles. We urge you to think about the topic as they elaborate on their areas of research. And we anticipate that when the floor is open for questions and comments, we can find the threads that bind their talks to the larger concept of control and identity. Here's how it works, as Lorraine was saying. We have 10 speakers, each speaking for 6 minutes, to which we will hold them. This digital clock will do that work for us. After 5 speakers, we will, in keeping with the 6-minute concept, take a 12-minute break. Then the final 5 speakers will present. This is a lot to take in. I mean, when you realize that very diverse topics, speakers from all across the university. And since we would very much like to engage in discussion after these talks, we ask you to maybe make a note so that you remember what it is you'd like to bring up at the end of the talks, when our speakers will be here waiting for you and your great questions. Okay, now to our first speaker. Julie Podmore is a sociocultural urban geographer with an interest in feminist, queer, and historical materialist theory, a perspective that is reflected in her publications on Montreal's lesbian spaces. She is currently a co-researcher on the sexuality, vulnerability, and resilience research team at the Université du Québec à Montréal, where her research projects focus on queer youth geographies and on queer generations and neighborhood change. She speaks on queering the Myelin. Julie?
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. Oh, you have to come over here? Okay, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to present to you today the work that I worked on over the summer, and for which I had funding from CAPFA, actually very generous funding that really helped me out a lot with my research. It is a project on queering the Myelin. I came to, whoops.
You have to probably point it
The computer, that's just right.
at, or I can do it.
Okay, thank you. I came to this research primarily, well, in a number of different ways, but one avenue was that in the current literature in urban studies, which is my field of research, there is a lot of discussion about the shifting and changing of relationships between LGBTQ populations and neighborhood spaces. So I was wondering about whether or not that kind of change was going on in Montreal. In addition, students, some in Jim's class over there actually, and students that I work with in the faculty here had been suggesting to me that there are a number of new types of spaces being created by younger queer populations in Montreal. And then of course the press suggested to me that there were new geographies being formed. An important one, of course, is highlighted by the first two, this idea of moving beyond a so-called ghetto in the village, Montreal's gay village. Another kind of geography here, basically the inscription of the Myelin is a kind of queer space, and yet another here insinuating a relationship between gentrification, hipster urbanism, and the Myelin as a queer space. Could you change your things? Okay, so the project that I built up over the course of the summer sought to look at LGBTQ new urban geographies. In particular, I was concerned with generational changes and responding to the literature that I work with, which suggests that among younger LGBTQ populations and in recent years, there is a strong disidentification with places like Montreal's gay village. There is the emergence of new identities, such as post-gay identities and queer identities. And another literature that examines what we might call queer-friendly spaces, or what are the characteristics of neighborhoods, the ambient characteristics, as it's called, that make certain neighborhoods appealing to queer populations, but that are not necessarily queer neighborhoods. And then finally, a lot of new literature on social class fragmentation among LGBTQ populations and the impacts that that has on neighborhood formation. And the role of language, but I'm not going to talk about that because I don't have enough time. Okay, so next one. Thanks. My goal was to examine the shifting relationships between LGBTQ identities and urban space. And what I did over the course of the summer was a case study of young LGBTQ populations in the age range of 18 to 30 that were queer identified and lived in and around Montreal's Myelin district. It also included Petit Patrie, Park Extension, and parts of Beaumont. Okay, could you change it again? Okay, I worked with a team of 5 young researchers from, 5 young students here from Concordia, mostly because I realized that to do this project I needed some help. Younger queer generations are definitely the other for me, as I, am not part of their social world and not necessarily, I don't necessarily have the same perception. So it was really important for me to develop a more participatory project that I worked on with students from our department. And I chose to work with students who were very much part of the social world of the Myelin. At least 3 of the 5 students that I worked with were part of that social world. All of the students were identified as LGBTQ students, basically. They, of course, helped me build up the questionnaire. They helped me to develop a kind of cognitive map of what might be the queer Myelin, which you'll see is different than the formal Myelin in a moment. And they also built up a sample for me by using their personal network, something that we call in social science snowball sampling. Okay, there we go. So here is, it's not a very good map, it was our really field map. This, of course, is the formal boundaries of the Myland. And then we sought to extend it based on their cognitive understanding of what constitutes a kind of queer Myland and its adjacent neighborhoods. So this is sort of the activity space, I suppose you could say, and this is the extended residential area that is connected to it. Okay, last slide. 52 seconds. Okay, and here are the questions that I asked in the questionnaire, all of which were meant to target some of the ideas that I brought up at the outset of my talk. But perhaps you will ask me questions about them towards the end. There we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, number 2. Andrew Forster focuses on art and design as tools for investigating urban issues and public space. His current work is directed at installation, video installation, and movement-based performance shown in visual art and dance venues, at design for public space, and responses to art in architecture and urban design competitions. What he asks are practices in commercial and public space that de-design, that is, unfix processes of control, of identity, of institutionalization. Andrew?
Yes.
Are you ready to go?
Yeah. I don't need to do anything. I love you. Hold me, don't let him take me. Don't let him handle me and drive me mad. If you can keep me, so I tried to pick a project that relates to public space, but it's kind of a source for me. So it's a project from a few years ago. In 2003, I was invited to Sofia, Bulgaria, with a bunch of artists from Montreal to do an exhibition at the National Gallery of Bulgaria. And on the way, this was a thing I was reading in the newspaper. It's the kind of videos that I make in airplanes. And it's, I don't know if you could start that. So I was reading this article about this guy named Bruce Jackson. And the piece is called Jacksonville. And this is called Jacksonville. You can go to the next slide. Who is Bruce Jackson? Bruce Jackson is kind of, was a senior executive of Lockheed Martin who during the Bush era, this is the build-up to the Gulf War, left Lockheed Martin to be a kind of lobbyist for the United States government. He wasn't an employee of the State Department. He was a kind of private sector diplomat. And he was the guy who wrote a letter called the Vilnius Letter, called the Vilnius 9 Letter, which was various states in Eastern Europe who were in support of the invasion of Iraq. And it kind of counteracted a European effort which was maybe a bit more pacifist. Next slide. This is a slide from one of Bruce Jackson's own PowerPoints, and it's kind of indicating all of the horrible things that are emanating from other parts of the world, such as narcotics trafficking, terror, proliferation, sexual slavery, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of his viewpoint. Next. So what I did, or what we did in Sofia was, and one of the signatories of the Vilnius letter was Bulgaria. And one of the places where Bruce Jackson and his group is very much active in terms of drawing Eastern European nations into NATO was Bulgaria. So we made a picture of Bruce Jackson, and this is Bruce Jackson's name in transliterated. You can go to the next slide. And we put up posters of Bruce Jackson. So we kind of, this guy was a backroom diplomat, right? Somebody who's never seen, somebody who works in the shadows. So we decided to out Bruce Jackson. And for the exhibition, we put up thousands and thousands of posters of Bruce Jackson all over the city of Sofia in Bulgaria. Next slide. There's more of that. Next slide. This is an article that appeared in the paper, and I'll just read a little bit of the article because it kind of explains what happened. Mysterious posters with the image of the person responsible for the American Committee for the Expansion of NATO, Bruce Jackson, were pasted up in the streets of Sofia on Monday. Then goes on to talk about making contact with Bruce Jackson. Jackson himself explained that he had no idea who might be behind the story in these posters, which make it look like he is going to run for the elections for mayor of the capital. The American lobbyist, however, quickly offered the thesis that the posters must have something to do with the Bulgarian prosecutor's office. At the beginning of the year, Jackson said there was no doubt that the Bulgarian chief prosecutor was dealing in illegal activities. So there's all kind of good governance stuff going on at the time. At the beginning of the year, Jackson said there was blah, blah, blah. The prosecutor, however, replied that he didn't know the person, Jack Bruxon. Jackson's comments on the phone was that in Bulgaria, completely unexplainable things often happen, which only enhances the ex-Soviet researcher's thesis that this country is unpredictable. However, he believes that slowly Bulgaria is progressing in the right direction and would soon be a member of NATO and the European community. Next slide. And so that was the action in the street, in public space, and of course it was also an exhibition indoors. This is inside the National Gallery of Bulgaria, kind of a 19th century building. And the exhibition was simply a portrait of Bruce Jackson on the wall, and a CD player, and you could press the button, and it would play that song from Porgy and Bess by Nina Simone that we just heard. And I have 15 seconds. I can show another slide.
Okay. Pilgrimage studies expert Matthew Anderson walked 350 kilometers along ancient trails in Norway and Scotland last summer, and several weeks ago opened the Symposium of the Pilgrimage Center of the College of William and Mary in Virginia. His documentary on the Camino, Something Grand, was premiered at Concordia in 2012. He will speak about the effects of the modern walking pilgrimage, everything from the calluses of community to the metaphysics of blisters.
Now, if I only had 6 minutes, really only 6 minutes to talk to you about studying pilgrimage, that would take a lot of control and some identity. Maybe talking wouldn't necessarily be the best way to begin. This summer, as was said, I hiked about 350 kilometers, and I've checked with pilgrims also in the Camino de Santiago in Spain, miles and miles with them. To do this kind of thing really is quite wonderful because you get up in the morning and you really only have 2 objectives in your day. One is to walk 25 or 20 kilometers, and the other is to take care of your feet while you do that, thus the boots. So, with only 6 minutes, I might start just by asking if you could walk with me.
Absolutely.
If I only had 5 minutes, I might have to tighten that up a bit. I could tell you maybe in 5 minutes about the history, the identity of peregrination, another word for pilgrimage, about how starting in the 19th century with Wordsworth and Coleridge, and especially in the 20th century with the baby boomers, pilgrimage, at least in modern Western society, changed drastically. Modern Western walking pilgrimage, more about the journey than the destination, more about the psyche than the saint, more about the exercise than the exhortation was born. Change the slide, please. Or maybe with 5 minutes, I tell you about this wonderful field of research I'm in, about how pilgrimage studies is truly interdisciplinary, bringing together sociologists, historians, anthropologists, exercise science people, theological studies, environmentalists, you name it. There are so many angles from which to study this phenomenon. I am a diversity and a sustainability professor and also a theologian and a documentary filmmaker. I'm interested in learning and recording how a pilgrim faces the big questions in life. Why am I here? What is my relationship with the physical world? What does my life mean? No, sorry, you only have 3 minutes and 47 seconds, you'll say. So, really? Okay, another slide, please. With 4 minutes, I might have to talk about the heart. If you could go on to another one, please. The heart of modern Western walking pilgrimage, which is all about, another one, please, which is all about the story. The story is, I had blisters. Boy, did I have blisters. And I'd love to tell you about the moment we could have been swept away over a waterfall in Norway, but I can't. Or the time in Scotland I walked all day without any food except the 2-day-old baguette that had hardened in my backpack that I'd nicked in London. Or the time I walked into a field with a herd of cattle only to realize that that really, really big cow with big shoulders, not a cow. Or the time I climbed mountains and slept in a sheep shed and ate flowers for nourishment. Or pilgrims like to blog, to write, to tell stories of their travels, usually stories of hardship. There's a theory for that. In our modern, generally easy life, walking pilgrimage is something akin to marathon running. It's a form of voluntary, controlled hardship. It's what in the old days might have been called white martyrdom. The two necessary ingredients, difficulty and telling the story. Another slide, please. So, 2 minutes and 34 seconds. What can you tell me about control and identity? Well, I'd skip the theory and go to the next slide. And go straight to Louis C.K. I hope, yep. On a recent Conan late night show, who talked about why he didn't buy his young daughter's cell phone. Some of you may have seen this. Yep. If you did, you know that he says sometimes you just need to be able to sit there like this, he said. That's being a person, just sitting sometimes. And then he said, you know how underneath everything in your life there's that thing, that empty, that forever empty, you know? To which the audience kind of laughed nervously. She'll change. Well, where CK could have gone next was to the idea of melancholia. He could have gone on pilgrimage. My theory, at least one of my theories, is that modern walking pilgrimage is a creative way that 21st century society has evolved to deal with the problem of melancholia, the dread or angst or fear of death that most of us try so hard to avoid. So, in the interests of, if you press the button, 1 minute and 33 seconds, I guess I better get to full disclosure. This last summer, after many years of walking, I also walked this trail in Norway, an ancient pilgrimage route that's been resurrected, if you'll pardon the pun, by a somewhat uneasy alliance of church and state, one interested in the pilgrim's soul and the other in their dollars. If you'll change again. In Butzjordgau, I met a one-armed German who was trying to prove to himself that his life was worthwhile. In Opdal, I met another pilgrim, a woman whose husband had committed suicide and who was walking to prove to herself, mostly, I think, that she was still alive. Powerful people, powerful stories, powerful walking, and powerful, really powerful needs to be able to talk more about that, if you'll change again. Hold on, you tell me, 44 seconds. Well, the stories are interesting, but I've got to keep going. I'd like to tell you more about Norway, but I'll just change to the last one. With only 35 seconds left, I'll take you back with me. The last afternoon of my 100-kilometer trek on the St. Cuthbert Trail in England and Scotland, I waited for low tide, took my boots off, and walked barefoot the final stretch across the seabed to a place that's called Holy Island. The sun was shining, that beautiful buttery light that you get in the late afternoon, you know, and there were a group of seals singing. I swear they were singing on rocks over on another island. What a privilege it is to study something you can actually do. And what a fascinating, rich field of academia that brings together all of these things. Thank you.
Timing. Okay, our next speaker, Christine Stosik, has been working, teaching, and conducting research in collaboration with Cree and Inuit people in northern Quebec for almost 20 years. Christine is a PAR, or participatory action researcher, and is currently conducting several PAR and participatory evaluation projects in collaboration with artists, after-school educators, the local school, and hunters and guides from the Cree Nation of Wemindich in James Bay. Sorry, I'm sure I got that wrong. Christine.
Thank you and welcome. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the people of the Longhouse, more widely known as the Six Nations of the Iroquois or Mohawk people. My gratitude is extended to the Cree people, elders past and present, whose wisdom we continue to benefit from and share. I want to recognize Chief Mark, my research colleague, and Sammy Blacknett, whose research this work grew from. So that's a picture of Wamingji on the top right. And Wamingji is one of 9 official Cree communities. There are several still in negotiation. They're the yellow squares. They consist of coastal and inland communities. It's located in northern Quebec, and Wamingji is on the Mogodo River, which flows into James Bay, so it's considered the James Bay region. It's a population of about 1,400. Wamingji is living through a time of great social change. Questions of identity, their articulation and clarification have profound implications for the community's ability to prosper in a healthy manner. Understanding of the community's initiatives is essential, not only for self-esteem and as a record of heritage, it is also key to supporting Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous research methodologies, and the decolonization of Indigenous and non-Native collaborations. I'm going to stay here. So this slide depicts the Wamingji-Iuch core values diagram. This research was carried out by Chief Mark and Sammy Blacknett, and I was requested to design the diagram after I'd witnessed Chief Mark drawing on his back window in his office with felt pen markers for about 2 or 3 years and struggling to try to come up with something. Originally, Chief Mark had asked the elders the following questions. How were our leaders identified in the past, and what qualities exemplified a leader who was well respected? Elders responded by sharing examples of leadership through storytelling. These stories were then analyzed, and this list of depicted values was derived. The terms on the horizontal band, notably respect and relationship, form the core values of the Wamingji-Iuch diagram. Iuch, in the local Cree dialect, means all people of the land. In this diagram, the use of the word Iuch specifically locates these values and situates Cree people geographically, as the stories told by elders are local and land-based in origin. Respect and relationship connect our physical, spiritual, intellectual, and emotional selves. These are the words of Chief Mark. We strive to maintain a healthy balance, which is exhibited through our interconnectedness and active engagement in all our relationships. These values are taught. Knowledge gained through this living process enables us to become a mentor or a teacher. Maintaining balance is not only a reflection of our relationship with our internal self, but just as important, it is a reflection of our relationship to our environment. Equally important is the relationship the environment, the animals, and other people have with us. The balance we achieve within ourselves is a reflection of how our values manifest in our life and how the environment manifesting in an infinite variety relates and interacts with our lives. Those pictures on the bottom, the poster went through many, many different changes, which I'm going to get to, but that's the first printing, and we invited all the elders to come to the community hall and their families, and then they had a chance to respond over a few months period of time. And later on in the summer, we went to Old Factory Island, which is now part of their new protected area, and presented again and at a summer gathering. So went through like a 2-year process of validation. Okay. For the diagram, we decided to use the metaphor of rippling water as it exemplifies the interconnectedness of all living things. We weren't looking for an original concept, we were just looking for a lasting one. In the beginning, I placed the terms teaching and knowledge, that's here, they're up there, teaching and knowledge, where respect and relationship are now. It is in the most prominent position, especially reading left to right. Chief Mark thought about this and requested a change. Respect and relationship as core values should occupy a more prominent position. Teaching and mentoring mean the same in Cree. How well you mentor is a reflection of the balance you have achieved living life respectfully. Hence, respect and relationship occupy a bolder, more central position down at the bottom. That's a moment of the influence of teaching as being as ongoing colonization process. The brown bar in the first image was superimposed over the environment, overpowering it. In later diagrams, the ripples of water fill the entire space, and the brown bar becomes blue. It is now the environment that occupies the most prominent position. The brown bar, when replaced with the term all living things, displaces the former illusion of a human hierarchy. And this is Chief Mark very patiently looking at the diagram and me talking about depth and moving things forward and backward and colors, and him saying, well, you haven't quite got that story, and retelling and re-explaining over and over again. The word self represented humanity and felt too strongly connected to contemporary Western ideas. Changing the word self to iuch, which is plural and connects people back to the land, represents one of my biggest leaps in understanding Cree epistemologies. Dislodging my previously unacknowledged assumptions of the actual meaning of this paradigm. The diagram now depicts Cree understanding of the environment and how mankind is situated within this worldview. I'm on my last slide. Oh, I'm out. Well, those are my conclusions.
Thank you. All right. Artist Adrian Nervin, whose work adorns our very cool posters, focuses on immersive drawn environments with large-scale drawings, paper constructions, and modified found objects, and is currently working on an elaborate paper set for a costume sound performance piece entitled Mr. Fizz's Knocking Shop. He is preoccupied, he says, with non sequiturs, inappropriateness, shabbiness, and disorder. His work consists of large format drawings, massed hangings of smaller poster-like works, rangy paper construction, and laconic found objects, and has been shown in galleries across Canada and in Germany. Adrian?
Okay, when I first got the two words control and identity, I thought control, half the time I'm out of control. If you look at my desk at home, you'll see it. So this is going to be partly out of control. But I'm holding my notes the wrong way up. There's like 10 words that are supposed to make this talk. There's like, I think there's 30 slides here. I have no idea how we're going to go through it. Identity, I hadn't thought about identity very much, and I thought about its academic presenters, you know, fine presenters, and I thought, how am I going to fit myself into that? And I think essentially, I'm a fantasist. That's what I do. I make fantasies, and I think my whole process and part of this talk is the business of trying to make these fantasies more and more real for me. They're sort of for you as a byproduct, really. But I've made very, very large drawings. I think you could argue that I've made very, very large drawings in order to like wrap myself up in my world. My world has a lot of different strands that go into it. One of the major strands, I think, is like, oh, if only I could be 17 again, smoking dope on a college campus and having long hair and playing music with my friends, right? It just comes back to that. So that's about as far as I got with like making drawings of that stuff. That is a big like 12-foot drawing. Do note the musical references. The other thing that I try to do as a fantasist is I fantasize that I'm a musician, that I am a musician, but I fantasize that my music is something that can be public, which it can't really be very public. It's really messy and out of control. But the music weaves through all of these things. Next, please. All right, the detail from that. I'm going to concentrate a lot on a paper house that I built, just to show you that these paper houses do have a genesis somewhere. Next, please. Right, a detail, because you can't see the first image at all, could you? You know, it's invisible. It's impossible to document these bloody drawings because they're massive and detailed. Nobody can do it. All right, next, please. All right, somewhere in the middle of making gigantic drawings, I was foolish enough to accept, wasn't exactly a commission, somebody sort of twisted my arm into making a paper sculpture. I'm not a sculptor. I'm still not a sculptor, but sometimes I have to make paper objects. Hence the organ. It's bigger than life size. It doesn't function, but it is entirely made out of paper, no cardboard, no wood, nothing. That's another thing that keeps going for 3 minutes. Okay, next, please. All right, I tried to actually make a performance space for myself filled with drawings and paper objects, paper keyboards, actually. Again, it's all paper. I'm not allowed to use cardboard. That's part of my identity is I'm paper obsessed, and everything I build has to be made out of paper, mostly the same paper, and it has to support itself, which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous, but I keep going. Next, please. I went so far as to make myself a costume and a wig and perform in this performative space. And I'm not really a performer, even though I did study music. I should be a performer, but I'm not really a performer. But I insist on doing this. I'm actually a very shy, nervous person, and I don't really like to be seen by people. So it's complete anathema to me to be sitting there behind keyboards playing for people. And people mostly don't know what I'm doing. They stand there very puzzled. Next, please. That's the full Monty. Don't ever try and draw, egg carving things. It's impossible. Right? There should be a room full of those. I couldn't get to a room. Next, please. All right. We get the whole record sleeve from the character, right? Building my characters. Next, please. Right. You just skip that one. Yes. All right. Here we are in my studio. We're getting ready to build my house. There's stuff on the wall. God only knows what it means. There's a lot of stuff. Look, it's Mr. Fizz. Title of the piece is Mr. Fizz's knocking shot. Next, please. There's some studies towards it. Confused, don't know what I'm doing. This entire drawing, sitting in the studio. Don't know what it is. Don't know when I'll have a show. Probably never. Never finished it. Next, please. Right, Netherland. Self-explanatory. Never finished that either. Next, please. Right, tourist trap. I like that, but we'll skip it. Next. All right, there's the house. There's the house from a rakish angle from my strange photographer. Don't ask me. Next one. Better view. You can see there's an interior, and it is my performative space in paper. Right, everything happens in that performative space. Next. Right, side view. Isn't it nice? Yes, it is. Next. All right, little view, little things on the floor. Fizz bottles. Mr. Fizz. He's an alcoholic. No, he's not alcoholic. He's a bootlegger, musician, hippie. I don't know what. Next. There's a house, another view, next view. Yes, lovely, restored, 1979, not true. It's all paper, right? It's all paper on paper 2x4s. It's made of nothing practically. Hasn't fallen down yet. Next, please. Right, there's a bar on the side. Next. Those are the drinks that you can have at the bar, if you had time to read what you could have. Next. That's the back view. Notice, it's a nice Georgian door, very formal. Next. Right, there's the inside view. Next. My costume that I wore. Next. Looking out. Next. 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 Cute. Next. Oh, here I am, Germany decided, she said, bring something. I said, I'll make the toilet to go with my house. So this is the toilet that goes in my house. There's me performing my Lincoln costume. Next. There's back view. I thought Germans would be appalled by this bottom with shit coming out, but they were like quite polite. You know, they didn't bloody laugh. That's amazing. Next, please. Right, there's the view inside. You can't sit on this. It's all made of paper. You'd kill yourself if you fell through it. There is pornography on the back of the door. Next. Come on. Yes, there I am, my costume. Next. And the other way. Next. I don't see that. That's it. Yes, good.